Welcome to the number one triathlon podcast, according to a random email I got.
Oh my gosh, so
hilarious.
Man. It's like here's the thing, right? Is you want to believe that, but you can't believe it because they could send that to everybody and they just redo it and they put everybody at number one that they send it to.
I know, I thought of that too, but I was like, well, I think maybe just by volume we're probably up there. You know, I'm just guessing.
Well, seriously, yeah, we kill you with frequency and consistency, but that's about it.
Yeah, I don't know. But I appreciate all the nice comments that we got off of that post in our closed group.
Yeah, so that's nice little way. You know, sometimes sometimes even if it's, even if we're not number one, it's nice to put it out there and feel like we're number one for a little bit. And, get a little extra love. We've been doing this for a long time. And
sometimes you need a little motivation, man.
What's that? Exactly. Like we talk about it all the time. Sometimes, we can do a lot on internal motivation, but sometimes we need a little external motivation. So we'll take it. And it's March the 6th year. It's 2025. Welcome, everybody. Listen to the Crushing Iron podcast. This is episode 836.
Yes. And today we are the mighty Wallenda brothers. Do you know what that reference is? It's the acrobat. What are the acrobats without a net?
Never. And I see what you mean. Is that this is like their special day or something?
No, I just meant we're flying without.
Yes,
without an agenda a little bit.
Flying netless.
The Flying Wallenda brothers. Was that a real thing or just a TV? I can't remember. Maybe someone will help us with that reference.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure someone will definitely correct us. But yeah, we had. Did you have like the random like half blizzard plow through? That was like yesterday. We had like beautiful weather Monday and like, I don't know, today is Thursday, Tuesday. And then all of a sudden it was like, it got super cold, 50-mile-an-hour winds, got a little snow overnight, 2-hour delay to school. And then back today, it's like going to be like 55 and sunny.
Yep. We got the exact same thing. And somehow magically a beautiful hole opened up right in front of the house to jump in the lake.
No way. Already?
Yep. Yeah. Everything I can see from here is still ice, but there's a nice hole right in front of the house. So I used it yesterday. Got back in. It's been a long time. It was a little dicey, I gotta be honest.
I was going to say, how cold do you think that is?
I mean, it just melted, so it's got to be like 30, what is it, 34 degrees or something? I don't know, 30 something. I mean, it's ice water. There was an iceberg floating by me while I was in there, so pretty cold water. But
I was going to say, how long were you in for?
Yeah, I just kind of couple minutes. I was, when you do that shit by yourself, it's a little bit like, because first of all, it was a 2-foot drop off, so I had to kind of step down, and then I was a little mentally concerned about getting out of there. Not that it's a huge thing, but you slip and who knows. So it was fun though. It felt good.
I mean, do you like tell your neighbors? You're like, hey, dude, I'm coming out there. If I'm not back out in like 4 minutes, come pull me out with the hook.
No, they just watch. Telescopes. They're like, there he goes. So I feel like when I walk out there in my shorts and kind of look around and stretch a little bit, they're
exactly. And you wonder, you're like, man, would they even you take a little bit of slip, you go under. They're probably thinking, that's the problem with like people that do stuff like that is you go under and they're probably thinking, he's probably doing like a 5-minute breath hold now. So they're not even going to come check on you. They just think you're doing some other, like you go out there in the ice, you're getting your ice exposure. And then next thing you know, you're going to do a little, you could do a little bit of a breath hold. So they wouldn't even come check on you because they just think you're out there doing, the next step of crazy shit.
No, my neighbor, Jeff, he's over conscientious about everything. So I'm sure he would have been limping down there to try and see. He's got all the tools too, the rescue equipment and everything. So I think it would have worked.
Well, hopefully it would. Hopefully he doesn't ever have to use it. But yeah, seriously, let's not go there. Let's not tempt fate.
No,
but it's always good to have it, right? It's like the people that have like the doomsday bunkers. You don't ever have to use it, probably ever, really, under any circumstance. But you feel just a little bit better knowing that you have it. I had 2 different directions we could go on topics today.
Okay.
We were gonna let it, kind of let it fly, kind of let it hang out. We could go swim. I spent a little time at the pool this morning working with some some of the collegiate girls that are in town. And then we could also go with the one we talked about a little bit before the podcast on Tuesday, which I personally really enjoyed, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily think that these things are a stimulus, but just kind of talk through different ways that we as coaches kind of impact our athletes with different types of stimulus that doesn't just simply define itself as a change in a zone, whether it's, because most people think about stimulus in like two ways. It's either, or maybe three: increasing intensity, or keeping intensity and shorting rest periods, or just simply extending the duration of a session. That's typically the only like three different ways people think about, stimulating an athlete's, physiology and getting them to adapt to a certain thing. Is I can make it longer, or I can make it shorter and harder, or I can, instead of increasing the interval, I can decrease the rest interval. And I think there's many, many other ways you can do things. Because again, like as a coach and as an athlete, maybe you're a self-coached athlete, the thing you're trying to do the most is is to force your body to react and respond and change. And that, in essence, is, stimulating and adapting. So, yeah, we go with the direction. I'll let you take those and then go from there.
Yeah, okay. First off, I want to just say that the C26 Club should be available tomorrow on the website. I know we're a little behind on that, but if you wanted, a plan and a couple other nice options, like talking to a coach before you start up to your A race, that'll be up on the website tomorrow. Because a lot of people have been asking about it, and I know we're a little behind, but still, I mean, races are in the fall.
Better late than never.
Better late than never. You can check it out up. I think it's under coaching, and it says the club. It'll be up. It's not up there yet, but tomorrow, and you can check that out. And we'll get you organized and get you on the right path for your A race. So back to your topic discussion.
Topics, whichever one tickles your fancy today.
Well, did you have some specific thoughts about swimming this morning?
I mean, do I have specific thoughts about swimming?
I don't know, man. I like them both.
You like it? Well, just pick one. Because it sounds to me like you don't like either. You're him and on. It's like, hey, where do you want to go out to eat? I don't know. You pick.
Well,
I pick a few, and you're like, I'd rather go here instead of there.
Well, all right. I'm gonna pick stimulus.
I like it. Yeah,
yeah.
The reason I brought it up is because there's, I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with an athlete, and they were talking about, like the different ways they can, go harder and go longer. And also, but why that's so difficult, right? Again, like the traditional ways you want to stimulate, or force an athlete to adapt. And that's just general, load, right? It's just you place a load or a stimulus, and then your body has to respond to it and get better, get faster, get stronger, be more, increase its aerobic capacity, be able to go longer. But there's a lot of ways that you can do that just within the zones that you're doing. And I think that's like most people just stick to the same cadence and the same, rep interval scheme and the same rest intervals. And it's all the same. And a lot of times you just get burnt out doing it. And like, as we're kind of entering in, as kind of like most things, like the closer you get to the race, everything becomes more like enhanced, right? Because you're just closer. Once we get like a little taste of spring, I find, early February, people know you got a ways to go. People are fine with the trainer, or as fine as they can be. But as soon as they get like that first taste of like an outside ride, like last week or two, they're just like, oh my gosh, I hate the trainer. Because you now know you're so close to being able to ride outside so much more. Same thing with like, you can, if you're stuck on the treadmill for 2 weeks, you kind of just go with it, but then the weather gets nice and now you hate the treadmill again because you're outside. People just tend to disassociate from different types of training. But one of the things I've been trying to do we've always done, right, as we talk about this a lot, is high cadence, low cadence. And, there's even across like all three disciplines, swimming, cycling, and running, there's a lot of different ways you can stimulate the body to elicit change without changing the zone that you're in or the rest interval scheme that you have, So like start with swimming, like, so you can ask an athlete to do, zone 1, zone 2, 200s, 300s, regular swimming. But I could also ask that athlete to do 2 to 300s with pull buoy and paddles, or pull buoys, paddles, band. And again, I just think it's really, because then same breath rate, maybe even lower heart rate and respiratory rate, because you're not using your legs, but you're stimulating the upper body, you're engaging your core more, and it feels more muscularly hard, right? But if I said just swim zone 2, you might feel more, like it's easier from a muscular standpoint, but it might feel harder from a respiratory standpoint. But you're still doing, again, one's a 130 pace and the other one is a 130 pace, right? So you're, a lot of people like to measure lactate and how high we are, how close we are to our LT1 and LT2 and our thresholds. You're gonna have the same, but you're eliciting a totally different response in what you're engaging, what you're focused on. Is it just your aerobic capacity, or is it muscular endurance? And that's just with swimming, right? But I think it's just important to know, when you think about ways to force your body to make changes that will make it better, it doesn't always have to be wrapped up around intensity or raising a zone.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you could even argue, for open water swimming is another one where you are, swimming straight, or you're taking breaks, right? Or you're swimming in open water is a lot harder. So you might have a 135, 140 pace versus a 130 pace in the pool. There's just so many different ways to do it. And I think it's important for athletes to really understand, especially when you look at the 3 different disciplines, how am I trying to elicit a response that doesn't always have to be, through traditional zone model, right? Same thing with cycling. Cycling, you can do zone 2 big gear work, or you could do zone 2 high cadence work. Both of them, same power, maybe different heart rate. High cadence will probably get a little bit higher heart rate. Big gear will probably get a little bit lower respiratory rate, lower heart rate, but you'll have the same power output. But it's going to feel totally different, right? You're working on different types of muscle and ligament and tendon recruitment, whether you're going fast twitch or, with high cadence, you're going big gear work and really trying to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible, but you're still in zone 2, right? You're still creating you're isolating a different part of your stroke mechanics to make yourself a more efficient cyclist. Again, forcing yourself to have a different stimulus that's not solely dependent on your zone model. Same thing with running. You could ask an athlete to go run downhill at zone 2 and their heart rate might be high, or you could ask them to run uphill at zone 2 and the heart rate might be high, but on flat ground, it's pretty much the same, right? Uphill, you're obviously having to work harder to move up your body up the hill, so your heart rate's going to be a little bit higher. Downhill, the heart rate is going to be higher just generally because of the impact that you're putting down in your body. Could even be the same pace uphill as downhill. And then you have flat, which is totally different, right? And we talk about it a lot when we talk about, our favorite kind of run courses. What do we like the most? Do we like flat? Do we like rolling? Where, what elicits the best response? A lot of people, just kind of disregard the specific demands of the race, whether it's rolling, whether it's flat. And if it is a flat race like Florida, or a flat race like, Texas, where the
Yeah, man. Honestly, everything you're saying is exactly why I love hills so much, because they can create that different sort of stimulus. And I actually love running up hills. I love cycling up hills. We were talking about that the other day. And, you're going up, so you don't have this sort of expectation that you have to be going fast all the time, but you're still, if you're still getting that stimulus. And, I think it was a long time ago, somebody told me that when you're climbing a hill, sometimes, if you're in a real small gear and you're spinning hard, or not hard, but fast, and your heart rate gets way up. But if you gear down and go slower, it's that big gear effect. It kind of slows your heart rate sometimes. So if you're breathing super hard and you kind of go down a gear, that can kind of lower your heart rate. Now I'm, whatever, it seems to make sense for me. But I've also been thinking about this a lot on my own, because I've been doing a ton of treadmill work and with the inclines and that sort of thing. So it was interesting that we're talking about this in a way, because yesterday I'm still trying to, I'm kind of like, I've always, the last year or so been doing a lot of run walk kind of stuff just because for me it's more enjoyable. And plus right now I'm trying to just build up a little bit more endurance and things like that, and sort of in a way that doesn't shell me. So I've been doing a lot of, 1 minute walks in between a couple minute runs, whatever it is, up and down, and trying to get up my speed just a little bit on those shorter segments. And then yesterday, after I was going to go an hour or something like that, and, with not total running, but just a total hour on the treadmill. And I got to a point around 45 minutes where I was like, I think what I'm going to do now is just walk up and down a ladder of incline. So I did like 1 minute at 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, and 15 or whatever. And then I came back down, and it was just an interesting break. And then I ran it out for another 15 minutes or something like that. And I felt really good about it because I got some, and I always talk to athletes about this, and why I like run walk is because I can find myself getting more, time on my feet and building what I feel like I'm building a little more some strength without really shelling myself. And it's just something that I'm doing. And I'll even get off that treadmill sometimes and do like hanging every 10 minutes or something. I'll hang for like 30 seconds or something like that. And then I'll just get back on and kind of just, as I'm building up my endurance, I'm just trying to kind of keep an eye on certain, just kind of connecting the body along the way with it and building, that's like back core, because I feel like I really get tense sometimes on the treadmill. Or yesterday I was running a little bit and I started feeling my shin getting a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. So I got off and I just kind of kneeled down on a pillow and laid back on, kind of back on your heels type of deal, and stretched it out for like a minute, and I got back on and everything was cool. So I'm just thinking, well, as I go, maybe you get this kind of feeling, it's okay to stop for a second, kind of maybe lengthen some stuff out or like kind of move around in a different way and get a different muscle balance going on. And it just seemed to work, but I'm just really liking the stim, because you're right. It's just not really driving my heart rate super high, but I'm, walking up hills and kind of in the same ballpark, but doing different things. And it's kind of been enjoyable, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I think it keeps you on your toes, but it also, I think a lot of times it shows you where you may have like deficiencies in the effort and the output that you're trying to accomplish. It's like, again, going back to swimming, some people are faster with the buoy, no paddles, but some people are faster with the buoy. Some people are slower with the buoy. That alone tells you a lot about where you're getting the most, where you're expending more energy than not. So if you're faster with the buoy, it usually means two things. You're upper body dominant and you don't kick that much, and you probably have, not that ideal body positioning. Right? Because the buoy helps you stay higher in the water. You're not having to do that on your own. If you are slower with the buoy, it means you are probably very, very, very kick dominant. So you're getting a lot of the propulsion from your kick. So if you look at it as like, you're trying to raise a bar, like you're using, right arm is your kick, left arm is your upper body. Well, when you do a bench press, then your right arm is doing more heavy lifting than your left. So it's always going to be stronger. And your left, right, which your upper body, is not required and asked to do near as much work because your kick, again, your right side, is benching the majority of the weight. Well, then it's not going, your upper body, your left arm isn't going to get as much adaptation. It's not going to get as much load, so it can't adapt. Then you remove, right, the right arm to lift the bench, and you can't even budge it or you can't even do half the weight, right? So if you got 100 pounds and you remove one, you can't even do 50, right? Which you should be able to because it lifts half or even more than that, but you can barely get 20 or 30. That, again, tells you a lot about maybe where some of your deficiencies are. And then again, there are different ways that you can stimulate growth and adaptation and elicit some kind of a physiological response by even just doing things within the same zone. Right. So maybe try kicking less and trying to pull more. It's going to feel harder and be harder, but your heart rate and your pace might be the exact same. Right. Same exact as like you talked about, like with hill work. Like you can do so many things going up and down hills. Like I remember like looking at it at trail camp, especially when you're on trails, you go up a hill slow and you go down the hill. You might go up a hill at 10 minute, per mile, and you're having to work pretty hard. and then you slow down and you can breathe in and out of your nose on the downhill. You're not breathing out of your mouth. You're totally aerobic from a lung, respiratory rate capacity, but your heart rate is so much higher because of the pounding and the impact that your body is taking, right? So then you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I can do some like more downhill work to where my stabilizing muscles in my body is more capable of withstanding the impact that I'm giving it. Again, you might not see like an immediate, oh, this is going to immediately bump up my threshold, but the point is to make you a really, really, really well-rounded athlete with the fewest amount of deficiencies in, whether it's your run stride, whether it's uphill, downhill work, whether it's your swim stroke, whether it's your cadence, right? Higher cadence is great, lower cadence is great. Then hang out in the middle stuff or like race pace or long stuff. But like you can also force your body, because you see us all the time, especially with cycling cadence. You're like, people are like, I hate big gear work or I hate high cadence work. And anytime I hear I hate, I automatically think, okay, well, we got to do more of this, because you don't hate it because you don't feel like you're good at it. And if you're not good at it, again, even if you're going across the same intensity level, then we see an opportunity to improve a deficiency and make it become more efficient. And that doesn't have to be, we just have to do more VO2 max work or more, zone 3 steady state work or sweet spot work. It can just be, we need to do more cadence work and cadence change and forcing the body to respond, because all that does as well is it strengthens and you become more economical, you become more efficient. And that allows you, again, in a roundabout way, not as a direct way, to put out more power. Let's put out more pace, because now all of the kind of the finer tuned aspects of your cycling, pedal stroke, your run economy is now working more efficient. So then it's requiring less effort to put out to put out the same type of output.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there too about being a well-rounded athlete, because to me, we were talking about this last time, I think, about mobility and stretching. So, I've been working on these kind of things, and for me, my right side has just always been dominant, and it's just way tighter. So I've always, like I've talked about this before, but when I'm, sometimes I'll count strides or whatever. I always try to lead with my left side. And like you're saying, I don't know, it may never equal, but it's just that incremental sort of balance that I'm trying to create. And that's why the thing about the treadmill that I love is kind of, repetitive in a sense, where I can really sort of think about and work on my stride in sort of a neutral environment and really kind of keep that, I was thinking about running, how, if your right leg is a lot stronger, you're going to, you put more force on it and all kinds of things. It's just more natural. So, but like trying to lead with your opposite hand or your opposite leg on the bike or in the pool or whatever is kind of an interesting experiment for me, because it's just one of those things where I'm just trying to recreate that well-roundedness, that balance between both sides. And, the whole premise behind this is, whenever I'm on this treadmill nowadays, all I think about is making it feel easier. So like everything I do is sort of, how do I create a better balance between both sides so my right leg isn't flaring out to the right too far or whatever, just because it's stronger and it can handle it. But just trying to find that really good balance perspective. We talked about that before. Sometimes you get out there running and I'll feel like I really have an easy, perfect balance going. And I'm always sometimes it's just hard to find unless you really work at it and understand what's going on, because that's what I always tell athletes is sort of like, our goal isn't to make this feel harder and push it all the time. I think one of the most underrated things about triathlon is making shit feel easy, and a lot of times that boils down to form and good side-to-side balance and, just having that kind of, synchronized body that can really work together all the time.
Well, you even think about like we've talked about this plenty, right? Is like the opportunities that we all have with improving our efficiency and our economy across the three disciplines, right? And so like I remember hearing this a ton about Patrick Lange a few years ago, and obviously he's, halfway decent at running, is how much time he spends on efficiency and economy over speed and duration. He famously runs a lot less than most people or almost all professional triathletes, yet he's arguably the best marathon runner in Ironman.
Yeah.
And he spends an enormous amount of time on economy and efficiency, right? Because so you have to think about it this way. Maybe it's you can take the pistol that you got or the rifle, whatever it is, and go to the shooting range and just practice shooting over and over and over and over and over, going to get better, and that's it. Or you can find ways to maybe work on your stance or work on how you hold it, or like all these fun, and that's across every sport, archery, hockey, basketball. There's just grit work, and then there's technical aspects that also elicit a stimulus response. And you can't just outwork. Like, people think that all the time. Like, I can just outwork everybody. Well, sure you can. But if you ignore, again, Lionel Sanders, perfect example. The guy probably works as hard and harder than anybody, but failing to pay attention to the finer details of the sport and of swimming and cycling and running is going to leave him way short of probably what he could have accomplished, having put in a lot more details or being more detail oriented. And so, again, and that's why he's the people's champ, right? Because that's what most age groupers do. They just want to outwork and go hard all the time. They don't want to spend the time because they feel like they're losing time by focusing on details. And again, like, I think we all know, like, I know for me, if you're more sore on one side of your body than the other, then you know that there's an issue, right? If you know you're putting out great power and this feels like this, and focus on making sure that's the most balanced part of what you're doing. Same thing with swimming. Like I said about the, being sore with the pull buoy or faster with the pull buoy. There's just so many different ways you can stimulate growth and it's about becoming a better all-around athlete. It's not about just, because again, like, this is, especially this time of year, this is why I think it's a great time, because we get so caught up in harder and higher all the time. Yes. Does that improve? 100%. But if it's coming at a cost, like, what's the cost of doing business, of going so much harder for so much longer all the time? Because what happens frequently is a lot of times, like, if your form goes to crap with swimming, there's two decisions you have to make. Do I grab the pull buoy and do I finish it out with good form? Or do I take longer rest intervals to give myself more rest to then have more form, but I won't do the distance? Or do I just get the swim done and know that I'm increasing my fitness, but I know that I'm implementing bad habits? And I think that's, honestly, some of the times that's the hardest decision to make. Because, as I try to explain to everyone when we start doing swim work, is like, you have to have the fitness to hold the form. Period. Like, you can do, like, everyone can do well, not everyone, but you can do the perfect stroke for a couple strokes, but it's about holding it for 200. And then you start, like, I was having this conversation with a parent whose kid just got bumped up from one group to another and this is probably, well, hopefully a great analogy, is she just got bumped up from one group to the next. The next group is an even more competitive group. And I didn't know that. And I said, why is she swimming this way? And it's like, she's forgotten everything that we've worked on. And she was like, well, she got bumped up groups. So she's really having to work hard to, like, hang on to the back. And I said, to me, like, that's one of the hardest parts about, do you want to be the leader of the group, right? In swimming, or leader of the group that you're in, because you can hold your form and hold your fitness? Or, again, that's the typical mindset when you, like, swimming specifically, the harder you go, the slower you usually get. So as an 11-year-old, all she's thinking is, if I just work harder, then I can catch the feet in front of me. Versus, okay, if I just think harder, which again is harder for 11-year-old. If I just think harder and stay more focused on my best and strongest strokes, I can keep up. It's mentally fatiguing versus anaerobically, just being spent and then just throwing your arms and your head this way, in which to just by brute force, which is how a lot of people, I think, train. They just try to improve by brute force, and that's it, right? But that's not going to carry you forever. You've got to focus on the things that allow yourself to continue to put out that force. Again, using a swimming analogy, it's not about how much effort you're putting out. It's about how efficient you are and how fast you can go using the least amount of effort. And so when you look at cadence work and working on different stroke mechanics in the pool, or doing hill work, or even cadence work in drills when you're running, it's about being able to maximize the output you already have. Because then, even if you don't improve on your 8:30 pace, if now your 8:30 pace now feels like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 instead of a 5, we are faster. Let's say your 8:30 pace goes from a 145 heart rate to a 140. We are now faster, right? You're not faster from a velocity standpoint, but we're using less energy. So therefore, we now can hold that 8:30 pace for longer. So in the immediate present, we are not faster. But at the very end, we're able to either go longer or maintain that critical speed for a longer period of time before it starts to get slower. So we are faster. And I think that's just a really hard thing for everyone, right? To grasp is we look at, because everything is so immediate in feedback, right? You look at your watch and it gives you your immediate pace, which I think is always off, right? You go in, because we've all run, like, and you're like, I am cruising. You like on the greenway, you go underneath some trees, and you're like, I am not doing 10:20s right now. and then like 2 seconds later, it drops back down. Same thing with cycling, right? Your power drops or whatever. It's, swimming, it's more based on feel and it's more automatic. But like we have this obsession with the instant feedback response of this is what it is and this is what I can always do. I just have to raise it versus what was the average, right? What's the summary of the session? How was pace? How was it related to heart rate? How was it related to my effort? How was it related to duration? All these things you add all those up, and that's how quote unquote fast or quote unquote strong you are becoming. How are you increasing your endurance? There's just so many ways to like chop that up and get better at it. It can't just be a harder, longer, or shorter, faster recipe all the time, especially for everyone when there's so many other things we can focus on to get better and more efficient.
Yeah, good stuff, man. I think back to when I started Ironman and, coming from, like baseball and basketball, just team, like stuff like that. When we started working together, man, Ironman, to say it seemed impossible is an understatement for me. I just did not grasp the idea, when you can't swim, 2 laps and can't run a mile, that type of thing. But that's why I became so fascinated with the mental aspects of the sport and this idea of making things feel easier and just kind of like what you're saying about, thinking through it a little bit. And, when you're talking about that swimmer, I was just thinking it's sort of like, that concept of being in the zone. And I read that book years ago, and I've always just bought into that because I do feel like sometimes I get there, and how you get there, I don't know exactly, but I think, working on it and really paying attention to things like you're talking about with her and swimming, that's sort of, the more you express yourself in that way, the more you feel it naturally, maybe, or at least recognize it. And I think also back to one of I guess my first sort of exposure to sort of endurance sports was through mountain biking. And I remember going up to the Schwamigan Fat Tire Festival. I had ridden, some 20-mile races or whatever, but this was like a 40-mile off-road race. And some of the guys I had been kind of riding with along the way and meeting at these places, I remember the guy once said to me, he goes, don't overthink it, man. Just keep spinning. And that's like really stuck with me forever almost. And sometimes when I'm on the Ironman course, I just go there, it's just sort of just keep the pedals going around and not hammering them, but just keep spinning the bike, and when it's kind of like that balance in the run I was talking about. I think sometimes you can get there, but if you're overthinking it and worried about, looking at numbers all the time, and that's when I feel like I get in trouble otherwise, because to me, there's also opportunities within a race like that to really create your own opportunity for recovery within the race, and kind of just, you and I have been talking a little bit about the, kind of the short bursty spikes and things like that, and maybe how that gives you more energy, or you can maybe get into that a little bit more. But I've always felt like, sometimes I'll feel like I want to go after it and get up a hill quick, a shorter hill, and that sort of energizes me versus being cautious the whole time. And, you know, you just find those gear. That's why I love messing around with gears so much. I always put myself in bad gears and training and just kind of figure out how to get through it and get out of it and then maybe recover and find that super sweet spot where that pedal feels perfect and just like lay in that zone for a long time. So it's just really interesting to me. It's almost like sometimes you really got to, you know, slow down and just get the work in, you know, and really find a nice, comfortable pattern rather than always be in the back of your mind sort of like, I got to go harder, I got to do this or whatever, because sometimes that is the detriment for the whole day.
You know, like it's because I mean, here's another like, you know how it things feel to be true or how you recognize them from, you know, like I could ask, you know, in terms of like how things feel hard, right? And I get, you know, like if you, and this is for me, like if you ask me to hop on the watt bike and do 4x8 at threshold intervals, just sitting up the whole time, that would feel difficult, but manageable. And I would look forward to it. But if you ask me to get on my tri bike and hold the perfect aero position for like 8 by 3 minutes, or every 3 minutes, I'm just doing zone 2, but I'm holding the perfect position. My head's not bobbing. I'm not rocking. You know, my core is tight, everything. I'm in the right position. To me, I would much rather do the 4x8 threshold sitting up. Even though it's quote unquote harder in a harder quote unquote stimulus to make me faster, at this point in where I am with my development, my best bang for my buck would be to do, instead of maybe just make it a quick reversal, like instead of doing 4x8 threshold, I'd be better off doing 8x4 zone 2 in aero, perfect position, hands together, head perfect, you know, perfectly tucked, using my core. That would be a harder session for me. RPE might be even the same, because to me it's just taxing in a different way. And I think that, again, like we, you know, heart rate's lower because I'm in zone 2, but from like a mental focus, like having to hold that right position and in a position that I'm not super comfortable with at the moment, it's going to fatigue me, right? It's going to fatigue my muscles. So when you look at, like, you know, if I just put it on paper and you didn't read details and I said, all right, Mike, do, you know, 4x8 threshold or do this, and you're like, what's harder? I'm like, oh, 4x8 for sure. But if you read the details and you take that and you apply it to where your deficiencies are that you can acknowledge, then you're gonna be like, oh, well, dude, like, give me the 4x8 all day, because then it's just work, right? It's work in a position that I love and that I feel super powerful and super strong with. Give it to me all day. It's apples to apples. And then you put me in the other one, right, where same amount of work, quote unquote, lower heart rate, lower zone, right, power output, but totally different position that I'm not comfortable in, that I need work in. That to me is going to feel more daunting. And if I had the choice to pick and no one was watching, I'd pick the 4x8 threshold sitting up. And so, like, I think that's hopefully a decent example of like ways to quote unquote improve that aren't stimulus related. And I think we totally ignore that so often.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing, right? Is I remember when we used to ride a lot together, and I found, you know, we go out to the lab or whatever, and that was just sort of an aero haven. And I would always, you know, towards the end of the season, I could get to the point where aero was more comfortable, but I don't know if it was sometimes I found a better pedal stroke, or I found a synergistic pedal stroke that went along with my aero, and it wasn't, it was more efficient, it was faster, but it wasn't necessarily harder. And it's just so interesting when you think about it like that. And because, yeah, you can put, you know, as obviously climbing up a hill, you can throw down some serious output and the watts go through the roof if you want to. But to be able to, you know, sit in this weird zone where you're going faster and be okay with that, you know, because I think you're right, man. I mean, aero is such a huge part of, you know, most courses, I feel like, and being able to discern as to what you can handle maybe in aero is so key. because if you're trying to put out those same kind of, 4x8 numbers in Aero, it's just going to be a whole different thing. And I mean, I just also think it takes a long time for your body to really, feel comfortable to the place or just get strong enough in Aero. For me, it's always been a challenge, but we used to ride a lot of hills up in Aero, remember back at the Trace. And I remember thinking, I was like, wow, this is, it was very hard. And then it got to the point where it was kind of comfortable and we enjoyed it. And it was just figuring it out. And I think a lot of that is sort of understanding what your ability is, as, with regard to your position and everything else like that, I mean, currently I'm on a trainer and I'm using a stand-up desk as my Aero bars because I just can't, like you're saying, man, it takes my body a long time to kind of get back in there and get used to that. And it can just feel so much harder. So I'm kind of working my way back down.
Yeah, but it's wild to think about it. Cause I remember when we would do those, you could always hold Aero longer than me, when doing those repeats. And I remember so I just think it's really interesting to think about like how we associate improvement through just pure work, effort, and intensity and power, and not directly how it relates. Like everyone's about, specificity and power and pace and race pace. But I'm like, a lot of people don't spend any time requiring like, even when it comes to like bike handling, right? People want to go and do courses like Wisconsin, or Lake Placid, all these courses that are technical, where you can give away, 1 to 5 minutes on just knowing how to climb, being in the right gear, descending correctly, taking corners, accelerating out of corners. Like that's a stimulus you need to work on, right? So it could be something as easy as like, I'm going to do 8 minutes race cadence, 1 minute big gear, 1 minute high cadence. And I'm going to try to at least simulate like cadence changes I might see on the course. But like these small little details are just so important. Like, and they all create stimulus. Like going back to the swim session I did with a guy, I told him, listen, you have a first place freestyle and an 8th place flip turn. And his dive too, last off the blocks. There's a championships this weekend. I was working with a bunch of kids, and I just told this guy, listen, you have a first place freestyle from flag to flag, but inside all the flags, you're an 8th. And so what's that going to get you? 5th, 4th? So instead of just trying to overwork, focus on some of these details to where you're not just purging speed all the time. But people don't want to work on that, right? It's not fun because you don't feel like you're doing work, but it's about being more efficient in the work that you're doing, not accumulating more work for the sake of more work and then having to be more efficient as the workload gets heavier because you haven't adapted to it, or the workload is just too much and then your form goes, to shit. And now putting out at 8:30 now requires 90% effort versus the 40 that it should be. And so like, again, like bike handling and even like swim stuff, it's like these small details that we should be able to focus on is just so overlooked. And even like, in the cycling, even even cadence, like quick cadence changes that you've got to be able to do. And we see this on every single race course that has like even an average rolling hill. What do you see? People get the chain caught, right? They're falling over, can't shift. Well, one, because they're not on a trainer that's got it stuck in, erg mode for them. And that's the biggest problem is people don't even know how to shift gears on their bike anymore. It's insane.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We see it all the time.
Yeah.
When to accelerate, when to like I can't go from high cadence to bigger without it being super painful, right? It's like all these things, or I can't spin, so I just grind up the hill, or I can't grind up the hill, so I just spin up the hill. You want to be like a Swiss Army knife. You don't want to be a one blade wonder. You want to be able to do everything all the time. Corkscrew, bottle opener, knife, whatever you got on the Swiss Army knife. Like you want to be that and make sure you're ready for everything all the time. Same with running, like short cadence, and nice and quick. Long cadence, we would do that. Downhills, I got to be prepared. Uphills, I need to be prepared. You have to be able to focus and learn and even like on like going slow with running. That's why, again, like we talk so much about hills, like they are your best friend. And because you can go slow up hills and work so hard on that posterior chain and get such a great workout, you might be more sore the next day than running 2 minutes faster on flat. Because it goes back to like because again, like once we become too dominant in one area, you get your whatever your non-dominant weaker side is gets more, the negligence and the imbalance is more magnified. So if you only work on, flat work, then you're going to be quad dominant. And then the more you do that, the weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker your hamstrings are going to be. And therefore, what are you going to do? You're probably more likely to have a hamstring niggle or Achilles niggle because all you do is flat stuff. And you might not be sore because you've done so much work on, your 8 minute pace on flats, because flats feel good and flats are fast. Then I ask you to go out and do, 4x8 slow, like zone 1, zone 2 repeats on a hill where we're just controlling heart rate. Speed is irrelevant. And you're going probably 2 minutes slower per mile, but you're really engaging your posterior, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, your Achilles. You're working those muscles and stretching and hardening those tendons and ligaments. You're going to be more sore the next day, 100%, from going slower. And that should be like a green light or red light, whatever you want to use, in terms of like, oh shit, like I have a huge deficiency that I've got to work on here. And back to me, like when I go run Waffles, I always pick this is a dog running, dog walking hack for those of us that like to take our dogs out, is you go on I take the hilliest route possible, because Waffles' stride is shorter and he gets to go slower while I go slower, but I'm getting more work than if we were on flats, because he gets most of the work. And I'm just climbing really, really, really slow, trying to work my posterior chain, and he's looking at me like, dude, what the fuck? What's taking so long? Versus like on the flats, he's like, why are you trying to kill me right now? And so it's better for both of us. But it is like you just go super slow and you work that so hard. Same thing, right? Most people like your perfect run stride on the track ain't going to be what you're running, except that first quarter mile out of T2, right? Because you're going to be so fatigued, you're going to have a totally different run form. People say this all the time. You go out and you run with like your partner or a friend who's in town or whatever it is, or your training buddy, and you go and you run like so much slower than normal. A lot of times you're way more sore. You're like, God, why am I so sore? Because you're landing on the, ball of your foot different. You're shortening your stride. You're recruiting more different muscles than you have before. All these are deficiencies. You got to be well-rounded.
Yeah, and you were talking about Waffles and the dog walk hack, and it just occurred to me that basically hills are hacks. And,
right, exactly.
And and we can wrap it up, but your quick thing about erg mode and everything, and it's just one of these weird things that I've always done on, especially when I'm a trainer, because I know that trainer riding is different, and you can, I love to think about getting in a zone and having just a clean flow and everything like that. But the difference is that if you have it, even if it's just an endurance ride on a trainer, hour and a half, say, or whatever, where you just kind of lock it into a certain watt and just kind of pedal, you get kind of daydreamy and out, in this weird space. So I've always done this where I'll just be pedaling along and I'll just put it in a gear where I'm good, but then I'll just crank the cadence for like 30 seconds and then I'll back it into it. I continually just will pop in there, because my theory has always been, if I'm riding outside, I'm going to be hitting hills, right? I mean, just naturally on an endurance ride. And yeah, I could take them easy or whatever, but usually they're going to be a little bit more output. So I kind of just always try to sort of grind that into my brain where I'm always, going to have to do something that I'm not doing at that moment, or at least adjust or do something or shift gears and maybe make it harder and push it for like 30 seconds and then back it back into it and just settle back in, because that's a huge part of racing as well. And you know how it goes, man. If you're on the trainer in erg mode for an hour and a half, just drifting into a Netflix show, that's fine or whatever. But whenever you kind of daydream or drift away when you're out there riding, you're going to hit a pothole. You know what I mean? It's like it always happens.
Yeah.
The minute you start daydreaming, you
cones all the time in races. I'm like, what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and we, like I said, we wrap it up, but it's
that's that stimulus within, unexpected.
And we've got
stimulus
workouts that just say, like, let the hills be the work.
Mm.
That's it. You don't need any specifics here. The hills can be the work. If you coach yourself, like, on your long runs, just alternate weeks. 1 week I work the uphills, 1 week I work the downhills. That's it. No, but what about the specific rest to interval ratio? Like, you're better off just doing it that way. A lot of people are. And yeah, it's I'm sure you feel the same way, but like when back when I played tennis, when I was a tennis pro for 2 years, assistant tennis pro for 2 years, I was also a better player. Because I was so focused on the details and the stroke and the mechanics, and then I would apply that to what I did as well. Same thing, like if I'm coaching swimming, I'm usually a better swimmer. And if I'm a swimmer, I'm a better coach. Like, it's not because you're doing it more, it's because you're paying attention to the smaller, finer details that make that, add them all up, make people great. And instead of just blindly, the work is the work is the work. And blunt force is not the answer, right? Precision is the answer. Efficiency is the answer. Economy is the answer. Yes, you need effort. Yes, you need to be able to dig deep. But at some point, in order to, make your work the most valuable and worth the most, you gotta polish it. And so again, hopefully that was helpful. Yeah. And, even though you hated my two topics, it seemed like you almost enjoyed that one towards the end.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm
Where do you want to go eat? I don't care. Let's go to Bonefish. Nah, I'm not feeling it. Let's go to, we can go to our usual spot.
Yeah. What was that? What is our usual spot? Where do we give up veganism again?
it's Firebirds.
Firebirds. Yeah. I was slowly giving it up with tuna.
That's right.
I ordered a Chilean sea bass or something, and you said, I'm going to have a steak. I said, yeah, I'll have a steak as well.
I did. I was done. Yeah, I was done with it. I relapsed hard on the ribeye and haven't looked back since.
I know. Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you guys. We love you. Look out there, like Mike said, for more info on the club. And if you need anything, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is your one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, dude. I'll see you later, man.
See you, buddy.
See ya.